And welcome to Connect and Collaborate. I am Alex Hopkins, your on-air producer. I am so excited because all week long we have had the opportunity to talk transportation, and we've spoken with several people throughout Colorado. We've talked about Colorado Department of Transportation. We've had CAP Logistics on. We've had Alliance Air Charter on. But I'm excited for this because we have Brandon Freed with us, who is in Washington, D.C. He's joining me by phone today, and he is the executive director of the Air Forwarders Association, or better known as AfA in the industry. And so, Brandon, how are you today?
I'm well, Alex. How are you?
Fantastic. Thank you for asking. So I guess I just kind of want you to tell us a little bit about your industry and the businesses your members are engaged in.
Well, we're kind of like the travel agents for freight, and our customers tend to come to us to identify and execute solutions to complex logistical challenges on cargo moving pretty much anywhere throughout the globe.
Wow, that is exciting. So how many members do you have here in Colorado specifically?
Well, I can tell you. I'll tell you also what kind of businesses they're engaged in. We have about 350 members in the association, and I can say with some certainty that virtually all of our members have offices or agencies in the Denver area. Denver's a big location for us.
Oh, nice. Okay, I guess I didn't realize Denver was a big location for you.
Yeah.
So I also wanted to ask you real quick. So we all know that flying is definitely under the TSA, right? The Transportation Security Administration. And so there's big security surrounding all types of aviation, including cargo aviation, right? How do freight forwarders work within that structure?
Well, so you're right in that there's a lot of security surrounding aviation. We all know that terrorists look at aviation as a target. It's a high-profile target for them, and we know that every day. Our primary regulatory agency that we deal with the most is the Transportation Security Administration, the TSA. Much of the details of our programs that we follow, of course, are under sensitive security information. They can't openly be discussed. But what I can say is that there is in place a very robust, multi-layered program which entails screening of all cargo and passenger aircraft. That's coupled with background checks on all the shippers and the supply chain personnel handling the freight. All cargo that's flown on passenger flights is physically screened by the piece. And, we're really in the security business, Alex, and the TSA is always validating, monitoring, and auditing our members and their facilities. The TSA has about 500 inspectors in the field just focused on freight forwarders. So there's a lot of security knowledge and know-how that our members have to have, and there's a lot of monitoring on the industry itself.
Well, and I know that one of the things that concerns people is sometimes these do go on passenger aircraft, as you mentioned, and that might freak people out, but I got to tell you, a lot of our listeners know, but just in case they don't, I am a part-time flight attendant, and I can tell you every time that we've ever had cargo on board the aircraft, they let us know, and they let us know exactly what it is, and so it's very transparent as far as dealing with the administration, right, with TSA and the regulations, and obviously we're vetted to carry that, and we've been told ahead of time. And so if anyone was concerned as a passenger about that, it is very secure, as Brandon said, and I would also like to reiterate that from my perspective, too.
Sure.
Yeah. So how does the work that your members do differ from the big integrated carriers like FedEx, UPS, et cetera?
Right. So they call them integrated carriers because they have their own trucks and they have their own facilities and their own planes and so when you think of the so-called integrators, it conjures up images of small packages, right? The ones that get delivered to your door or to your office. Forwarders typically are handling much larger multi-piece or bulk shipments. And of course, generally speaking, we do not operate our own aircraft, but rather contract scheduled carriers such as United Airlines, British Airways, Southwest Airlines, and countless others to perform the actual transport between cities. So as we talked about earlier, and as your experience just indicated, there's a lot of cargo flying underneath the feet of passengers with their bags in the bellies of those passenger aircraft. And there are a lot of flights flying throughout the globe as we speak, hauling those goods to market every day.
That is fascinating. Is there a typical air freight forwarding company, or is your membership a more diverse group?
We're incredibly diverse. I'll tell you that we run the gamut from local mom and pops to multi-billion-dollar global players, and many of them focus on specialized services, including such things as perishable food products, pharmaceuticals, biotech, that type of thing. Hey, this is really even neat. We even have a member that's based over in Los Angeles that specializes in the transportation of rock band concert equipment, like, think Springsteen, Rolling Stones, that kind of thing. There's an enormous amount of logistics required in moving those acts from city to city, internationally, or just, within a particular city. So, it's all about specialization. We have members that also do transport specialization in artwork, so that's they handle goods for just that go on display in museums and things like that. So it's an incredibly diverse industry.
That is a diverse industry. Is there one particular move that sticks out in your mind that you were proud to be a part of?
Well, I was I'm what I call a recovering freight forwarder, because I was a freight forwarder for a long time before I became the industry's advocate here in Washington on Capitol Hill. And I can tell you that, I'll never forget when there were a couple of brothers back in the 80s that wanted to corner the silver market. And I had a lot of retail stores I started out in Los Angeles, and they went and bought out every silver purveyor or retail store they could of all the silver, and they called me in and basically wanted me to transport it in containers on wide-body planes down to Dallas, Texas, where they were storing it all. And I'll just never forget meeting these two guys. They were called the Hunt Brothers, and I took a part and basically accompanied all the silver down to Dallas. It's been quite a long time, but I remember that because they wanted monitoring, they wanted the speed of air freight, and they wanted the security, and that's what it was all about. But there are countless. I think my favorite stories are the ones I hear from my members where they're doing truly heroic things, where they're shipping organs and vital tissue samples and things like that for people in hospitals that need these items as quick as possible because of life's at stake. Or, I hear about where there are, ball clubs and sporting events where team equipment has to be moved, and maybe it didn't go on the team plane, or they use one of our members to get the equipment in place. It's really just a fascinating industry. It's full of stories like that.
That is kind of heartwarming, right? I think that's one thing that people forget when they're, we all know that our Amazon shipments come in a lot of times by cargo aircraft, but one of the things that people do forget is that a lot of those are involved in life-saving techniques with the tissue and the organs and things like that. So that's kind of cool to get to be a part of that.
Yes, absolutely.
Now, do your member companies typically focus solely on moving cargo by air, or do they handle other types of forwarding involving trucks, trains, ships?
Well, there was a time when freight forwarders were mode focused, but that's changed in recent years. So now they'd rather, now rather than sell an actual mode, forwarders are increasingly selling solutions. So tell us what you have, when you need it delivered, and we'll provide the best solution regardless of the mode. Because, in the end, the customers come to us because they want the shipment delivered at a certain time or to a certain city, in maybe a certain way. We provide all the services that surround making that successful. And that might be, we might do picking and packing. There might be a storage element concern. There might have to be a delivery appointment made at destination. There might be constant surveillance going on with the shipment. And it's a lot of different needs that that are really interesting to see in making sure that we have a successful outcome to the shipment itself.
I definitely think we're coming into a new age of how things are getting delivered these days. Oh, and you mentioned that Denver is one of your bigger markets. What types of businesses in Denver engage your member companies?
Well, I would tell you that we look at those are the shippers, but it's important to not just focus on the shippers themselves. You need to look at the buyers, the consignees or the recipients. Those are our customers too. And given that the market then becomes not only what it is manufactured and distributed from Denver, but also what's consumed in Denver. So I guess the answer is anything you can imagine. The Denver area, as an example, has had a history of oil exploration. There's high tech going on out there. There's also it's just a vibrant manufacturing hub right now. It's becoming very popular. People want to move out to Colorado. I know a lot of people that grew up in the Washington, D.C. area that wanted to move out to Denver and Colorado itself just because of the lifestyle. And they set up shop out there, and they establish businesses that are highly successful. You're lucky. You live in a very vibrant area, and the economy has been good to Denver.
I couldn't disagree with you in the least. I 100% love living in Denver. I've been here about 8 years, and I get a lot of flack for being a transplant, quote unquote. But I see why people fall in love with the Denver area, and it's exciting to know that even though you are DC based and you work out on Capitol Hill, that we have such a good relationship with you in Colorado.
Great. Yes, yeah. Absolutely.
I'm going to switch gears a little bit here and focus a little bit on the state of your industry. So is air freight growing or declining?
I would tell you that it's extremely robust. Many companies in our membership are seeing 20% plus growth year on year. I was down in Jacksonville earlier this week speaking to one of our larger members down there. They were at their annual conference, and they're seeing growth month over month from last year of over 30%. Business is good thanks to the economy and, of course, this e-commerce megatrend that we're seeing. And we're busy right now.
I'm going to ask this because we know about the pilot shortage. And while we know that people are increasingly buying things online, and so we do need more, are your members still seeing increases in their businesses within this economy, even though we are facing a pilot shortage?
Yeah, well, it's interesting you bring that up because, yes, we're seeing a pilot shortage. What's happening is that the older pilots are phasing out, and, the military used to be the primary supplier of pilots. But, that even though business is increasing, we're still going to need pilots to fly the freight. And so that's, one of the big challenges that airlines have right now is getting qualified pilots that's out there. And so, we were not too long ago in a situation where pilots were out of work because there wasn't enough work for them. But that's changed, and obviously that's always a concern for us because we're flying with the passengers for the most part on these planes. So we're always concerned about that. Just by the way, as we're concerned about truckers and the driver shortage on the trucking side as well. We need drivers, and there have been a lot of changes in that industry, and the drivers now have a specific amount of hours that they're limited to work each day, and there's a shortage right now, and this once noble profession of driving a truck is no longer as noble as it's been, maybe because of lifestyle issues and whatnot, and we're looking for ways to make it more attractive for people coming out of school to want to operate trucks. So it's the whole transportation chain that we're always concerned about.
Absolutely. And how closely is your industry connected to the overall state of the national and global economies? And I'm going to give you a second question here. Feel free to answer both. But how are your challenges and opportunities unique to it apart from the state of the economy?
Okay, well, our industry is extremely connected to both the national and global economies. There are some economists who watch air freight volumes closely, believing they're an early predictor of economic activity. First to rise, first to fall. And so I would tell you that a lot of people, including myself, see it traditionally as a leading economic indicator. And so what happens is that, we can see volumes coming through Asia, through Hong Kong and whatnot. And when we see those volumes spiking, we know it's going to have a ripple effect. And typically, we can also tell you whether the economy is on the way up, because shippers initially, when, compared to ocean freight, shipping air cargo is, generally speaking, more expensive. So shippers will typically take a piece of a large shipment, fly it air freight to get it to the destination, to get into the hands of the recipient, and then they'll follow up the remainder of that shipment using maritime, as an example, using ocean, and to carry the second part of it. And when we see those air freight volumes surge, we know there's more freight behind it on the ocean side as well. And we are, in fact, seeing that right now. I was out at the Port of Los Angeles week before last, and speaking to Gene Soroka, who's their executive director, 40% of the cargo coming into the United States comes through the Port of Los Angeles, Long Beach. And I could tell you, they're just surging out there right now. So, yeah, there's an extremely close connection.
In general, what economic conditions and industry trends have the greatest impact, either positive or negative, on air freight forwarders?
I'd have to say consumer confidence as the ultimate driving factor. Much of what we handle, be it finished goods or components for consumer goods, is probably they probably have the biggest impact. Absolutely.
So, like most industries, it's all dependent upon your customers, right?
Yeah, but I got to tell you, Alex, if the consumer is out spending money, if you're after the show, you're probably going to go out and get a bite to eat, or you might stop in the store. If the consumer is confident and wants to spend money, that's going to drive the economy overall. And that's how we see it, and it drives everything from that. It's all about the consumer wanting to get out there and spend money.
Absolutely. So currently speaking, what are your challenges that your members face in maintaining and growing their volume and profitability?
E-commerce. That's a big issue right now. And then business to consumer direct selling, local and regional fulfillment centers, got to have it now, marketing. It's all playing a role. We're seeing volumes now that we've never seen in the past. I call it the e-commerce megatrend, but I don't know about you, but I'm always online buying something through Amazon, with their Prime delivery, because I can get it delivered to my house. And it's not just the small items. The freight forwarders are very involved with the larger items that people are now. It's funny when I started in this business. In the warehouse, you'd see boxes and pallets full of boxes, and then you'd see, heavy equipment and, machinery, that type of thing. Now you walk through a warehouse, it looks like a Costco store. You see pool tables and patio furniture and things like that, because people are buying this stuff online. And they weren't doing that in the past. It's really interesting, and they're using freight forwarders. The retailers online are using freight forwarders to do a good part of that shipping directly to the consumer. And by the way, it's not just to the consumer; it's business to business as well. All of that's happening online right now. It's really interesting to watch.
We've definitely grown up in an era where it's gotten significantly easier to buy things online. I have the small problem that a lot of people face, which is when I get a little tipsy, I love to go on Amazon and buy some silly things, like pillowcases that I think are going to be funny.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and who doesn't? And who doesn't? And you see, and after a while, it becomes a habit. I'm sure Amazon likes that, and other e-commerce retailers like that. But the point is that there's a lot that goes on logistically in the form of forwarders that are stocking the distribution centers, so that those retailers can quickly react to your order, because you want speed, right? You want it there as soon as possible. And those fulfillment centers, you see these electronic retailers setting up shop through these big warehouses closer and closer to the metropolitan area, so that when Alex presses that buy button, that retailer will have that item as close to Denver as possible. And usually, our members are in there just stocking those racks inside those distribution centers. And if it's a large item, it's very typical to find a freight forwarding company knocking on your door, delivering whatever that might be.
We have approximately 2 minutes, 30 seconds here left in this segment. Real quick, is there a way that, even though I'm not in the air forwarding business, is there a way that you guys to have membership outreach to civilians, so to speak, for lack of a better term?
To the actual shippers themselves. And, on occasion we do, and we try to make it our business to talk to shippers as much as possible. And, of course, obviously we represent the industry, but it's always important for us to know what shippers are thinking and what consumer trends are for the future, and also what manufacturing trends are. So, yeah, we do some outreach to the shippers directly. And, of course, we want to know what they're thinking going forward, because that's going to have an impact on our business.
Absolutely. Is there a way that I can contact you if I wanted to be a part of this?
Absolutely. So you could always contact me at bfried at airforwarders.org, bfried at airforwarders.org. And, of course, we have a website, airforwarders.org. You can find out more about us. And if you want to call us here in the Washington, at our Washington headquarters, we're at 202-591-2456. It's 202-591-2456.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Brandon. We are going to take a quick break here in about a minute. In the meantime, be sure to join us on the show at cobrt.com/live. You can join us on our YouTube channel. Check it out there. We also have this show and more that will be available at cobrt.com/radio-podcast. So Brandon, just real quick here in the last 30 seconds, if you weren't in the air forwarding business, what would you be doing?
Oh, great question. If I was in the air freight forwarding business, and by the way, I've been in my whole life, so I can't imagine doing anything else because it's my passion, and I really have a lot of fun doing it. I'd probably be a lawyer or something like that here in the Washington area because I love advocating for groups on Capitol Hill and at the regulatory agencies. But as I said, I've never done anything else. I've always been involved in freight forwarding and logistics, and believe it or not, I've become more popular, especially to the college kids that I go and talk to every day.
Oh, I love that. Well, we'll see when we come back if you've gotten your, if you've passed the bar. So we'll be right back in about
Great.
5 minutes.
Look forward to it.
Thank you.
Sure.
Welcome back to Connect and Collaborate. Once again, I'm Alex Hopkins, your on-air producer. And as I said in the first segment, all week we've had the opportunity to talk transportation. And so I'm very excited to have with me Brandon Freed, who's the Executive Director of Air Forwarders Association. And once again, if you are a shipper or if you are a cargo company, please check out airforwarders.org. And you can get involved that way. And Brandon, welcome back. Did you have a chance to get to pass the bar while we were on break there to be a lawyer?
Yeah, the bar is always set higher and higher, so it's hard to overcome it sometimes. But yeah, we'll never stop.
Fantastic. I'm going to jump right back in here. I'd like to talk a little bit about airports and infrastructure, which is integral to any airline, right? So if you wouldn't mind explaining for us the relationship between air freight forwarders and the nation's airports, how do they synchronize their logistical operations with those of the airport operators?
Yeah, well, so the relationship between the air cargo industry and airports is integral. As a matter of fact, we have our annual conference. We just had it. It's called Air Cargo. Air Cargo 2018 was in Austin, Texas, back in February. But one of our conference partners is the Airports Council International North America, the cargo managers from airports. So even though most forwarding operations are located off airports, but in neighboring industrial parks, we're on airport every day and multiple times a day, delivering cargo, picking cargo up, that type of thing. So, it's an efficient roadway access from and to the airlines on the airport cargo facilities is critical. But unfortunately, there is a frequently overlooked component resulting in congestion, delays, and needless waste of resources, and that's a concern for us. I would tell you that, and I do spend a lot of time around airport managers. They want to be good neighbors to the communities they serve. And so getting our trucks in and out of the airport efficiently is always a challenge for them. They don't want our trucks backing up outside on the interstate, creating congestion for the rest of the city. So it's a challenge for them as well.
I would imagine, absolutely. And I guess I never really thought about, a truck backing up the system. But yeah, it's pretty much the same as an airline tying up an airport, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
What a great example. I never thought about it like that. And speaking of those airlines and their air cargo carriers themselves, how do forwarders work with them?
Well, most commercial flights, as I said, most commercial passenger flights, not all of them. Some airlines don't handle cargo, but not all. Mm-hmm. Do carry cargo. The remainder of them carry cargo. So it's a partnership in every sense of the word. From a cargo perspective, we could not exist without the passenger airlines, and they probably, in a lot of cases, some airlines wouldn't exist without us. Now, let me give you a quick story. So, from a revenue perspective, from a gross revenue perspective, we're roughly 5% of what an airline revenue accounts for. But we could be as much as 30% of the profitability, contributing to the profitability of that airline. And so when an airline is deciding whether or not to fly a route, obviously their core focus is on passengers. But sometimes, if it's marginal and they're not quite sure what kind of revenue they're going to generate from that flight. They'll look at cargo very seriously because cargo will bring them to the goal they need to make in order to make that segment profitable.
So I guess this might be an off-kilter question, but I know that a lot of air carriers, and by air carriers, on my perspective, I am speaking about commercial airlines.
Yep.
A lot of those they will end up doing so they get paid by the government to do a few routes occasionally, and so a lot of times those end up not being full. Do you kind of maybe seek out those flights with less passengers? I mean, obviously you're not putting any cargo in the passenger area. It does go underneath the aircraft. But is there any way that you hop onto that because it might be better for profitability on both ways?
Well, I'll tell you, we respond to what the shipper wants, where they want it, they want the shipment delivered to, and the time of day. So we'll hitch a ride. We're not married to one airline, and so whether or not that airline is filling that filling that plane full of passengers or not is of low concern for us. We're just concerned about whether or not they have space in the belly of that plane for our boxes. Back in the old days, and I'm probably dating myself here, but the airline industry was at one time heavily regulated through the Civil Aeronautics Board, and that agency sunsetted, and now airlines are deregulated. But airlines used to get stipends or funding from the federal government to make sure certain cities were served. But that model's gone now, and the airlines need to compete on their own. So if a particular city, let's say as an example, Akron, Ohio, wants to have air service, if they can't convince an airline to fly into Akron, Ohio, once in a while what they'll do is that the local city will subsidize that airline to fly in there for a few flights, a day, just to keep the air service in the city. And so oftentimes, those planes might not have a lot of passengers on them, and they might not have a lot of freight. But usually that doesn't make a big difference to us. We're going where the shipper wants us to go with the package they want us to deliver. Which
makes complete sense, right? You're going to work with your customers, and by customers on your end, that does mean our shippers. And
right.
Well, and speaking to that, many of your members operate at the nation's busiest urban airports. We're talking LaGuardia, we're talking Chicago O'Hare, the larger airports.
Right.
DIA is making its way there. But tell us about the challenges that they face in trying to maintain their businesses in an environment where the operational and policy biases favor that passenger traffic.
Yeah, that's a great question, Alex. It's an ongoing struggle. People can talk, but the boxes can't. So we've embarked on a series of local events, regional events, where we invite all the stakeholders to openly discuss local issues and help identify solutions. So we've had these regional events in Boston, Chicago, Los Angeles, Dallas, and Seattle, where there are some, big issues regarding the volume surges, how cargo is handled. And even though we're a national organization, we come in and we set up shop with the boots on the ground, if you will, so we can get all the different stakeholders in the same room. And those stakeholders commonly are, not only the airlines, but the trucking companies, the airport managers. Sometimes we get city council members because, this is all about their economic vitality. You want to keep freight in and out of your airport because that makes your city more attractive to business and to private residents who want to move there. So it's something that it's a balance, and you're always working with it.
Lovely. And for a more overall perspective, what is the state of our aviation infrastructure, and what does that mean to your members?
I think it's mediocre at best. I would tell you that, airports right now are bursting at the seams, and some are seeing 40% surges in volumes over their plans, thanks to the e-commerce. And many airports simply do not have the land to expand cargo operations. So you look at a place like Boston Logan, and and you look at a map and you see that it's just water on the other side of it, and the city comes right up to the airport. These airports were built at a time when air travel was just getting started, and this was a new industry, and now they're facing current economic demands and realities, and they simply don't have any more room, and that's a big issue. Yet at the same time, you want new airlines flying in there because your city is growing. So that's a big issue. Now, the other issue is the air traffic control systems. They are so last century. I mean, we're seeing right now, there's the FAA reauthorization bill that's winding its way through Congress right now, but they're working. And by the way, I want to make sure that I want to be clear about this. Air travel remains the safest way to travel in the transportation industry. A lot of people would say you're crazy to get in your car every night to go home from work because of the accident rates and whatnot. We're not seeing that in the air traffic, in the air traffic industry. So it's very safe. But at the same time, it's inefficient. So as an example, when the controllers need to space planes nowadays, sometimes 5 miles apart from one another, because the radars aren't as precise, so they just want to keep them away from each other. They have to bring this into the 21st century, and that's going to require billions of dollars, because there's this system out there called Next Gen, and that's going to take advantage of global positioning system and technology. I think it's called ADSB. And what it does basically is it allows pilots inside the plane to know where the other planes are. It allows I got forwarders on my mind. It allows the air traffic controllers to be much more efficient in their routings of the planes, so you can increase the amount of planes in the skies in a very safe manner. But it's billions of dollars, so investment's needed really soon. Always a big question. Who pays for it? Do the airlines pay for it? Does the government pay for it? And it depends who you talk to. And the other question is, should the air traffic control system be, here in the U.S., it's government run. Should it be privatized? Certain airlines want it to be privatized. They want a private company to run it. Others say, no, we think this is an inherently government function. So I would say that we have work to do. And hopefully lawmakers here in Washington will see it, and we'll get the money needed to make the improvements so that we can continue being the safest and most competitive air traffic control system in the world.
I guess I didn't realize that ATC was having the same issues, because I know that commercial airlines, and we saw this all over the news, Southwest had their computer system broke down. Delta, same thing, right? So we looked at these large airlines, and they had computer systems. Their whole system hadn't been updated really since 1980. That was that was insane to think about, right? Even with Y2K and the craziness that we thought was going to happen, at least.
Yeah, well, so what I would tell you is that, like anything else, we're dealing with technology and automation, and once in a while there'll be a glitch of some type. I think what's happening nowadays, especially with most of these airlines, they realize that. They realize how crucial that is. And the trick is to recover as quickly as possible, be transparent to the passengers and the freight community, and let them know what you're doing to fix it. And there are disruptions, but I think what's interesting nowadays is how quickly they recover, because they know they've factored that the realization that there are going to be some glitches into their calculus, and they know how to pick up the pieces very quickly when that happens.
Yeah, absolutely. We're definitely getting better about that. I guess do you mind if I ask your opinion? You can absolutely say no. How do you feel about privatizing ATC?
Great question, and I have members that are on both sides of the fence, so I'm probably going to say I won't give you a definitive answer, but I can give you this, though. I can tell you that, when they talk about privatizing, there are areas of the world where that has worked out. I think they're doing it over in Europe, and they're doing it in Canada. But I would also tell you that securing, Canada is probably the same as Kansas in that it's not as large. They don't have they have a lot of airspace, but they don't have the same density that we have here in the United States. So you got to be real careful about it, because obviously, if you're going to privatize it, you're going to want to make sure that who you're privatizing it with, the company that you're bringing in to do the privatization, is reliable. They're well invested in, or they're well backed financially. Because in the end, the American public is going to be left holding the bag. So that's what I'll say about that. It's good to have Uncle Sam running the show, because that's it. It's something that at least we're securing the knowledge that the government is looking at things.
Exactly.
But it's a big debate here in Washington. I know a lot of people don't want me getting into it, so I won't.
And you know what? That was a fantastic answer. I do appreciate that. And you gave us.
Well, here in Washington, you learn to be politically correct.
I would. Well, yeah, you have to be. That's for sure. So
right.
We focused a lot on aviation, but I do want to ask a little bit here about the general transportation infrastructure. So what is your interest in the wider transportation infrastructure issues? Do things like the state of our roads, bridges, seaports, rail facilities, that kind of stuff, that has an impact on your members, I'd imagine, yeah?
Yeah, it does in a big way. So you got to remember that every single piece of freight starts out on a truck, and it's got to be brought to the airport or the seaport. It's traveling over our roads, our bridges. I here in the Washington area, last year I had 2 flat tires because I ran into potholes because the local roads were not maintained properly, and that's happening throughout the country. We don't have high-speed rail here in the United States because we're not making the investment. All of these areas are critical, and remember that it's obviously today's supply chains are sophisticated, they're complex, and it's not uncommon for goods or their components to move via multiple modes before they reach the consumer. So, as an example, something might start off in China, come over here on a boat into the port of Los Angeles or Oakland or wherever, or Seattle, wherever it might be, and then all of a sudden get expedited on an airplane across the United States to New York. It's got to go back on the truck again and delivered to the recipient. We're very concerned about infrastructure. We're very concerned about investment and the future of infrastructure in the United States as a result.
Absolutely. I know that's one of the reasons that we're talking transportation all week is because Colorado definitely is in that same boat with the infrastructure needs, and our Department of Transportation is working very hard. And we have a lot of organizations around Colorado that are collaborating together to come up with some really good solutions here. And so solutions on infrastructure, building and improvement seem to be caught up. Again, in this partisan politics, as you mentioned, you've got to be pretty politically correct in D.C. So how do we break free of these?
Yeah, well, hey, when you come up with an answer to that, let me know. I got to tell you, I'm 2 blocks from the White House here, and I could tell you that, what's going on in Washington with this deadlock politics is tough. It's tough to watch. It's tough to work through. But, partisan politics is not going to help our nation's infrastructure improve itself. We have to have creative solutions coming in from both sides of the aisle. And compromise needs to be the name of the game. So I think that's really important. And every lawmaker that you send to Washington, regardless of whether it's Republican or Democrat, whatever party that lawmaker might be part of, needs to understand that there's an infrastructure requirement that they're going to have to address when they sit down in the House and Senate. And we're not going to be able to get around that. Other nations realize that your road system, your nation's bridge system, needs to be top-notch in order for you or for your nation to retain its economic competitiveness. And the United States is no exception to that, and we're falling behind.
We absolutely are. I would 100% agree with you. I know that right now one of our solutions that has been proposed by the Denver Metro Chamber of Commerce was actually utilizing sales tax to go toward our infrastructure and our transportation budget. What are your thoughts on establishing something that's more reliable, like raising the gasoline tax, for instance?
Well, the gasoline tax hasn't been raised since 1993. And even if you impose a gasoline tax, which, by the way, is probably the way to do it, but you got to realize that it's limited in terms of its expectation because, cars are more economical today to operate. They're more efficient to operate. So they're using less gas. And now you've got electric cars coming on the horizon. Yeah, the industry is in its infancy, but look at these hybrid cars. They're using less gas. That's an issue. So we have to realize that if you're going to impose a gas tax, what's going to happen over the years when gas becomes used less by drivers? So the devil's in the details. And, the other thing that I worry about all too often is that we've seen so-called dedicated funds diverted to other or only loosely affiliated projects. The money's got to go to the potholes. It's got to go to the road infrastructure and to those bridges. A number of years ago, not too long ago actually, a bridge collapsed on, I think, I-35 outside Minneapolis. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a wake-up call for us. These bridges are deficient, and somehow or another we have to find a funding source, be it a gas tax, be it through sales taxes. Someone's going to have to pay for it. The money is just not going to fall out of the sky. And we have to realize that that's just part of running a country.
If money started falling out of the sky, I don't know that it would end up making it to infrastructure anyway. I think people would get their hands on it first.
Well, that's what happens, and that's one of the things we're most concerned about. The harbor maintenance tax. All of a sudden, we see this money diverted to other purposes. They see the coffers filling up because business is good, and next thing you know, the money's not going for the projects it was focused on to begin with. It was intended for. It's not right.
I completely agree with you. We've got about 2 minutes and 40 seconds here, and I've got one word for you, and I think you're going to do very well on answering this. But one of the biggest things that we are going through right now, especially with President Trump, is Nafta, right?
Yep.
Everything will be impacted by this, but specifically speaking on cargo, what are your thoughts on Nafta if we don't get a renegotiation on the table? Well,
I think that, NAFTA has been responsible for vast economic success since its inception in 1993 when that deal was signed. So it's hugely important. And I think that NAFTA needs to be updated because online ordering and Amazon and e-commerce didn't exist back then. So obviously it needs to be updated, but not thrown out. The North America and the U.S. in particular has done extremely well under NAFTA. And it's made us economically competitive, and it's actually created jobs. It's brought down the price of consumer goods tremendously. So I would be, if I were voting, I would say we ought to keep NAFTA, just make it better. And I think the president understands that. Obviously, there's rhetoric out there, but I would hope that there are cooler heads prevailing here in Washington, and that productive talks lead to some gains that will benefit not only the United States but our NAFTA partners.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Brandon, this has been a fantastic conversation. Once again, if you are interested to learn more about Air Forwarders Association, check out airforwarders.org. org. Brandon, we've got 20 seconds here. Any last remaining words for our listeners?
Well, I would tell you that when you buy goods or you buy an item from a store, you buy it from a manufacturer, or you get shipments in now your business, remember that there's probably a freight forwarder behind it somewhere. So, we're a business that flies low on the radar, but we're out there working every single day to make sure that commerce moves in the United States and that we are economically successful as a nation. So thank you very much for having me with you today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.